Okay, I am just thrilled to present to you Dr. Elia Gourgouris. He is just a phenomenal speaker. He is the president of the Happiness Center, which is an organization of world leading experts in the field of positive psychology. And they have helped thousands of individuals, both professionally and personally, to achieve happiness, success, and wellness. Dr. Elia is the author of the #1 Amazon best-selling book, Seven Paths to Leading Happiness. In it, he helps readers identify and work through principles such as gratitude, personal branding, and forgiveness, which everyone can apply to their lives for deeper, more meaningful, and lasting happiness. He has also published over 120 articles for various newspapers and magazines, including the Huffington Post. Dr. Elia is an international keynote speaker, executive coach, and a leadership consultant. With that, I gratefully and gladly turn it over to you, Dr. Elia.
Thank you, Dr. Donna, for your introduction. And I apologize. I just finished another conference, so I'm just jumping on here, and I missed this morning. Um, what I found really enjoyable is that in the other conference, everybody had their cameras on, and really I was able to see people's faces, their smiling faces, their happy faces. So is that something that we can ask? And I would love to see you. It's always good as a speaker to know who the audience is. So I would appreciate that. Thank you so much for doing that. There's Tarek. Yes, I want to see faces. I want to see smiles. That's right. That's right. Um, so I know this has been talked about before already this morning because I caught a little bit of the first speaker, but the humanity has had a really rough year. I mean, the last 12 months, we are getting our butts kicked. Uh, let's call it for what it is. The pandemic, um, the mental health crisis, of course, which is devastating people. You know, just according to the United Nations, and this is 6 months ago, so these numbers are not exactly accurate. Over a billion people struggling with depression, anxiety, and stress. Mind you, these are people that did not have pre-existing conditions, so that's important. And I think those numbers are way underreported because there's no way one out of only 7 people struggles with that. I mean, I don't know anybody who hasn't struggled, myself included. You have the financial and economic crisis where tens of millions of people are unemployed here in the United States and hundreds across the world, and a couple of billion people feeling financially insecure, right? Not knowing how am I going to take care of myself or take care of my loved ones. And then, of course, you have the social, economic, and racial strife that's adding to the pandemic. As human beings, we're pretty resilient, actually. You know, we can handle one or two crises at the same time. We've done it before, but it's very hard to handle 4 different crises. And that's not taking into account people's personal crisis, meaning maybe a relationship that's not working out. You know, divorce rates are going up. That's another thing, right? Loneliness, isolation, all of those things. And I work with a lot of chief nursing officers. So this is what they're sharing with me with their staff who are overworked. Not that they were overworked before the pandemic. So let's get that clear. Now you add what's been happening the last 12 months, underappreciated, clearly, who are squeezed in between, you know, demanding doctors, sometimes who are not always sensitive to their needs, hospital administration staff, budgets, schedules, you know, the work that they have to do on behind the scenes, and then of course taking care of patients who are sick. In the last 12 months, obviously sicker than before, and dying on their watch. And because I also work with doctors too, none of them went to medical school or nursing school and got trained to deal with something like this. Obviously, you know, I'm a psychologist by my background in nature. You know, medical doctors and nurses, you take the Hippocratic Oath. Being Greek, I know the Hippocratic Oath pretty well. You know, and you'll always know that you're going to be working with people that are in distress or people that are sick. But the levels of sickness and death that has occurred over the last 12 months is unprecedented. Certainly in peacetime, we will probably have to go back to the Second World War, and most of us weren't even, alive back then. So nobody has been really trained for this, and the level of post-traumatic stress amongst healthcare workers is unprecedented by their own account. These are not me. That's not me speaking. This is what they're saying publicly on media, but they're also saying, look, I can't deal with, looking at that now until this crisis is over. So they keep postponing. Um, and even they're saying, I know I need to go to therapy at some point. I just don't have the time right now because I still have, I'm in the front lines. So my talk wanted to address really the whole idea of self-care for healthcare, meaning as healthcare providers, nurses, doctors, hospital staff, and so on, how can we take care of them, help them take care of themselves while they're going through this? And back in March of 15th of 2020, which is a symbolic day in literature. March 15th is Beware the Ides of March, like Julius Caesar said in Shakespeare. I had a very, very strong prompting that, Elia, you need to write a book about the not only just about the pandemic, but the upcoming tsunami of mental health issues that are coming, right? And you need to get the book out in 45 days, not next year, meaning not in 2021, not November. You need to get it out now. To put that into perspective, my first book on happiness took 3 years to write. So getting a book out in 45 days, it sounded pretty insane. So I had to um, reach out to my writing partner the very next day. And I said, look, I'm going to start writing this book. Are you in or are you out? Can you help me? And of course, she didn't blink twice. He said, I'm in. And truly for the next 45 days, we put our heads down and we got the book out in May of 2020. And kind of the rest is history because the demand and the need, and initially we wrote it for individuals, like we know people are going to be hurting. I had a feeling like, and I trust that feeling, which is one of the 7 keys to navigating a crisis, of course, is to listen to that still small voice. Some people call it your intuition or your inner wisdom or the still small voice. If you're a spiritual person, you might call it the spirit, the Holy Spirit, whatever you call it. The more important thing is get quiet, even professionally. Not just in our personal lives, but I'm talking even professionally when we're working with people or even working with our patients. Get quiet and listen to that still small voice. Trust it. I've been listening to it for about 35 years. And when I was younger, I was kind of curious, like, well, why? When I got the message, when I downloaded the message, basically, I used to ask why. I don't need to ask why anymore because I trust it. And every time I've acted upon the messages that I've received, it has always worked out. That's one of the few absolutes in life because really life is not black and white. There's a lot of gray and all kinds of colors. But because I'm not a perfect human being, there've been plenty of times when I heard that message, I downloaded the message crystal clear, but I ignored it. And you know what? What happens when you ignore that message? What happens when you ignore your intuition or your inner wisdom? Things don't work out. So I'm asking you, as part of your personal self-care, get quiet, listen. It does require for us to unplug for our electronics from time to time. Um, Oftentimes when we're out in nature, I go for a walk every day. A lot of times I don't take my phone with me because I want to commune. I want to connect inside or with God or however you want to define that connection because it's powerful. It's something that's with me on a daily basis. And then, of course, when you get the message, act upon it. Now, I'm going to talk about self-care in a little bit. I want to share with you a couple of other principles to how truly challenges that we face. How can we navigate them, and not just to survive? Because I think a lot of times we go through life and we're just surviving. I'm like, how about thriving? Is it even possible? And is it possible to have happiness during these challenges? I believe that we're all graduates from the University of Adversity, every single one of us. Nobody escapes from that university. That's called life. And the older we get, the higher the degree. Like I got gray hair. I got 3 PhDs on adversity. What does that mean? It means that as we go through life, we're going to lose loved ones. You know, at some point, our grandparents, and later on, we're going to lose our parents. It's inevitable. Perhaps a sibling or a significant other, or God forbid, a child. We're going to have financial stress, unemployment, underemployment, um, foreclosure, bankruptcy, things like that happen all the time, right? We're going to have health issues, cancer, heart disease, diabetes. I mean, now we have the COVID on top of that we didn't have before. And all of those things take it's stolen us. There's no question about it. So, as graduates from the University of Adversity, is it possible for us to be happy? And when I talk about happiness, I go back to what Aristotle said 2,500 years ago on the importance of happiness. Here's what he said. He said, happiness is the whole meaning and purpose of life, the whole aim and end of human existence. Think about what a powerful statement that is. Happiness is what it's all about. And I get an opportunity to travel the world and to speak about happiness and wellness and so on. Do you know that I start every single talk by asking the audience a question before I get into my lecture? I'm like, if you were to ask any parent, regardless of nationality, ethnicity, religious affiliation, socioeconomic status, gender, you know, regardless of what would you like for your children? What is the answer to that question? And of course, the audience go back and said, I just want them to be, and the audience comes up, happy. So that is a universal need. And it's a universal desire. If we want our kids to be happy, and that goes across the board, why do we sometimes compromise with our own personal happiness? My biggest takeaway from 2020, from the pandemic, I almost feel like this giant finger from the sky came down and pressed the pause button on humanity. Why? To help us reflect, to help us think about what truly matters in life, what's truly important. And obviously, our relationships, it's not about things anymore. And obviously, I call it hope, health, and happiness. And all three of them are important. We need to have hope that things will get better. We definitely need to take care of our health, because there are no guarantees that any one of us will be here next year or even next month. Unfortunately, this is one of the things that COVID has taught us, but ultimately to find that happiness. So, so having said that, what can we do? And one of the principles is, one of the biggest words actually for 2020 has been the word resilience. You hear that all the time. And how does resilience play out in terms of managing the crisis that we're facing and the challenges and finding some happiness? I like to call the flexibility, adaptability, and resilience kind of all in the same group. And here's the analogy: what I call the oak tree and the palm tree. Now, the oak tree, as you know, is a massive, huge, tall tree, right? Has been around for 100 years, powerful, majestic. But what happens during a storm? If there's enough saturation on the ground and enough wind, like in a hurricane or a cyclone, guess what happens to oak trees? They come crashing down on people, cars, homes, and so on. We see that every year. On the flip side, the palm tree, which is relatively thin, tall, kind of beautiful at the top, at the peak of the storm. And now I want you to think about the storms of life that we all face and we're facing right now. The palm tree will bend, and it keeps bending. And at the peak of the storm, sometimes it gets parallel to the ground if the wind is that fierce. But guess what? When the storm passes, the palm tree rises up again and survives. And not only survives, but its roots are, because it had to dig in deeper to hold on for dear life during the peak of the storm, it's actually stronger than it was before. So the call to action is, for all of us, is to be a palm tree, not to be an oak tree. Now, as I've shared this message across the world, I've had people ask, she say, Dr. Elia, that's a cute story. I'll remember that. Be a palm tree, not an oak tree. But what does that look like in human terms? What is an oak tree? An oak tree sounds like this. Well, this is the way I've done things for the last 40 years. I'm not going to change now. This is who I am. It's that lack of flexibility. I don't want to change who I am. Basically, they're stuck. Now, why is that harmful to our health and to our happiness? I'm a sports fanatic. So I want you to think about elite athletes, football, soccer, basketball, hockey, and so on. These people get paid millions of dollars a year to play a game because they're very good at it. But all of those people who are in top physical condition, right, before the game starts, what are they doing out in the field for half an hour before the game starts? They're stretching. Why are these people stretching? They're at the top physically, better than anybody else that walks the planet. Because if they don't stretch, they're going to get injured. If they don't stretch, they're going to pull a hamstring or something even worse. So you and I are elite athletes in the game of life. If they need to stretch, we need to stretch. And what does stretching look like? When back in March, in 1 week, all my speaking engagement got canceled. And I was shocked. I didn't know what to do. I panicked, I froze, but only for a moment. And I pivoted and I decided to do something about it, which in the end ended up was writing the book and getting the book out. In life, it's not so much what we know, it's what we do with what we know. And there are typically four different personality types when facing challenges. And as I'm going through it, I want you to think over the last year, at what point did you play one of those roles? The first personality type is what we call the victim. And the victim, of course, is why is this happening to me? As if it's only happening to me and no, not the other 7 billion people, right? It's all about me, and I get down and I get depressed. Poor me in essence. The second personality type we like to call the critic. Now, the critic, regardless of what the federal, state, or local government says, regardless of what the World Health Organization or the United Nations says, criticizes everything every single day. A silly example, but a real example is this. Elia, you should wear a mask when you go outside. Well, that's stupid. Criticize, right? Okay, Elia, don't wear a mask when you go outside. What are you trying to do? Kill me? Like, no matter what happens, either way, they will continue to criticize everything and everyone. Then we get to the third personality type, which we like to call the bystander. Now, mind you, a good person, think of it of the deer with the headlights look, meaning they're so overwhelmed by the changes that are taking place. So they're frozen in fear, they're immobilized, paralyzed. They might look to their neighbor, look to the left, look to the right, but they don't do anything. And what all three of these personality types have in common is this, that they don't move the needle towards any kind of resolution. There's no positive outcome as a result of that. It's either poor me, feel sorry for myself, I criticize everybody else, or I'm just frozen in fear. Then we get to the fourth personality type, which we like to call the navigator. And the navigator, of course, does practice flexibility and adaptability. They do get quiet and they listen to that still small voice on the inside and then act upon what they hear, meaning they take initiative. They have a positive attitude, meaning that this too shall pass. I heard earlier on that, this is not a sprint, it's a marathon. I would venture to say that this pandemic for all of us, it's not even a marathon, it's an ultra marathon. And doesn't seem to end, right? It goes on and on. I'm an optimist by nature, and I completely misjudged this. I'm like, well, this should be over by summer, and I meant summer of 2020. I was completely off. I admit it, and I used to say that publicly. Now, I had other people say, "Don't be so optimistic," and that's my nature. I was completely off by almost a year. We're going to be approaching summer of 2021. Guilty as charged. I made a mistake. Not that I didn't take it seriously, but I never thought this would last as long as it did. So when you're running an ultra marathon, you have to prepare yourself mentally, emotionally, physically, and spiritually. So Tarek, would you mind bringing up now the personal health assessment, because self-care is the key. So I'll give you a couple of seconds to bring it up on the screen. And I'd like for all of us, as we go through these, there are 20 questions. Let's start with the physical health first. Perfect. Thank you. So in essence, if you score yourself a 4 or a 5, you're doing great. If you score yourself a 3, which is normal, by the way, threes are normal. They're not bad. It just means there's some room for improvement. But if you score yourself a 1 or a 2, then that's a red flag. And in terms of our physical health, again, what is the energy throughout the day? Do I have ups and downs, or do I crash at some point? Um, when we wake up in the morning, how well are we doing? You know that there's a global sleep deprivation pandemic, basically. Sleep has been disrupted, sleep patterns have been disrupted across the world, meaning even if we get our 6 or 7 hours, they're not restful. So that has a direct impact when we get up first thing in the morning. Are we exhausted? Are we tired? Are we ready to, hit the, you know, hit the road and have that energy that we need to get us through some very long and very challenging days? In terms of our diet, because of my own personal stress level has increased, taking care of my family, my extended family, friends, clients, and so on. I had to change my diet. And I haven't always had the healthiest diet. And believe me, it has forced me to practice better self-care, consciously and mindfully, what I put into my body. Before the pandemic, I would probably give myself a 2 when it comes to how healthy is your diet, honestly. Now I think it's a 4, but it's taking a conscious decision to say, watch what you eat, hydrate as much as you can, or else you're not going to make it through this ultra marathon. Remember, we're running an ultra marathon. Level of daily activity and exercise. Well, this is another one. Before the pandemic, I used to walk like 3 days a week for an hour, 3 miles, right? Because I had to. I'm getting older. I got gray hair. I feel like I need to move. Well, guess what? The stress level went up. Since last April of 2020, it's been 10 months now, I switched and I walk every single day, 7 days a week, come rain or shine, snow or heat. And I'm not compromising. This has become a new micro habit. And as a result of that, I feel so much better and healthier than I did a year ago. And my hope is, and I'm saying this, sharing publicly with you, once the pandemic passes, that I'm going to continue this habit because it makes me feel better. Being outside, being out in nature, walking, sunshine, the vitamins, sunlight, the birds, the blue sky. And I don't always sometimes I take my phone with me because, I'm busy or talking to clients, but other times I leave my phone behind, and it's just my way of connecting to nature and connecting with my inner self, right? That hour has become something that I don't compromise it with anything else. It's a must. I have to do that every single day, and I feel better. And of course, the last question about escaping, we know that drug abuse, alcohol abuse, smoking, all of these things have gone up during the pandemic. They were bad before. I mean, for us, now it's even worse. So how well are we? And listen, this personal assessment is not a test. It's just between you and nobody else has to know. Just be honest and be open. And again, look for areas that are you're doing well. Like, and if you got 4s or 5s, congratulate yourself, pat yourself on the back. But those 1s and 2s directly not only impact your health, but impact your happiness. Tarek, can you go to the next one? Next portion, which is mental health. Again, remember the navigator, positive attitude. Yes, humanity is down on one knee. Yes, we're getting our butts kicked, but this too shall pass. This is not the end of of this world. Has it been hard? Of course. But we can persevere through flexibility, positive attitude, love, kindness, and so on. So that's one. Ability to stay focused right now. Um, I would probably that's one of my lowest scores in this whole assessment. I have found myself, and I know stress does this, starting a task and maybe getting 80% there and then getting distracted by something else and not finishing. So I consciously have to stay, Elia, focus. this doesn't come easy for me, I guess is what I'm saying. I kind of struggle with that. I'm trying to get better and just finish one task before I start three others, because it's not even starting one. It's like, just juggling all the different things. Even like today, having to be at two conferences on the same day. Perspective, that's a strength. I have a five. My wife says, "How do you have such a big?" I've always had a big picture perspective. Like pull back the lenses on your life, on your work, on your day, and think about the big picture. Why am I doing what I'm doing? As a nurse or as a healthcare practitioner, what is the big picture? Why did I get into this? Because I wanted to make a difference in people's lives, right? Who are struggling, because when they come to me, they're sick. So big picture, not let's not get caught up in the minutia or the details. Like pull the big picture perspective helps. Gratitude. Listen, we all know that you cannot be grateful and depressed at the same time physiologically. That's impossible. When I'm in a grateful state, there are chemicals that are released in my brain that make me feel happy. And obviously, people that live life with an attitude of gratitude tend to be happier. Now, that's a cute little phrase because it rhymes, and we all know attitude of gratitude sounds great. The hard part is, can you be grateful when things are not going well? And that's when I go back to that University of Adversity graduate, right? Is it possible to be grateful even in adversity? Absolutely, it is. Because, um, like Nelson Mandela once said, in terms of adversity, and he was in prison for like 27 years, 29 years, right? He said, in life, either I win or I learn, meaning that he didn't see anything as a failure. And I love that. Either you win or you learn. That's it. So, yes, we can be grateful in difficult times. Most of my growth as a human being has always happened outside of my comfort zone. Like when things are going well, it's great. It's good to be in the comfort zone, but there's no growth really there. It's pleasant. We want to grow. It happens outside of our comfort zone when we are challenged. And perhaps we can even find strength, internal strength that we didn't even know we had until we were challenged to that point. And finally, how open are we to hearing other people's insights and opinions? Oh my goodness, we live in the divided states of America. Honestly, nobody's listening to anybody else. And this is not a political statement, it's a factual statement. The left to the right, castigating one another, nobody's listening. So, why is that important in terms of our mental health? Because, the old saying, the mind is like a parachute, it only works when it's open. I love hearing people, and because I get to, speak in India and Europe and all over the world, I love hearing people from different cultures, different ways of thinking, even if they're different than mine. That's okay. I'm always curious. That's kind of the psychologist in me is tell me, why do you feel that way? How did you arrive at that answer? Like, have a curious mind. And just because somebody thinks differently than you doesn't make them wrong, doesn't make them bad. I can add a whole bunch of other adjectives that people keep throwing at one another who disagree with their views, right? We have lost our ability to converse openly, honestly, because to me, communication is hot, right? Honest, open, and transparent. That's what communication is all about, which requires us to be somewhat vulnerable. So, again, stay open as much as you can. All right, next one, which I believe is the emotional health. Thank you, Derek. Gandhi said that forgiveness is the attribute of the strong. One of my favorite sayings. In my experience, and when I was in as a clinical psychologist in private practice, one of my expertise was addictions. So I worked with a lot of people that, because of their addictions, had destroyed their relationships, fired from work, got into legal problems, hit rock bottom basically. And at some point, they begin to work through get into sobriety, do some counseling, work the 12 steps in a 12-step group. And part of that is making amends to other people that they have hurt. So they go through all that, right? And I would ask them kind of like towards the end of our therapy sessions, I'm like, you think your spouse has forgiven you? Yes. Your kids? Yes. Your boss? Yes. Your friends? Yes, 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 yes. We go through all of that. You made amends to all of them. But yes. How about yourself? Have you forgiven yourself? Do you know that I never received the answer yes? Never. The the best answer I get was I'm working on it. But more often than not, the answer was no. So there's no greater gift of self-compassion than to forgive ourselves, which typically is the last person to forgive. And people really have a hard time forgiving themselves. Luckily, I'm Greek, and Greeks don't have a lot of guilt. So we make a mistake, and the older you get, the easier it is to forgive yourself. But most people wake up every morning before they get out of bed. They put on an invisible backpack. Imagine that they have a backpack they put on that's full of rocks and stones and boulders and little pebbles. And what do all those represent? They represent discouragement, mistakes, human frailties, weaknesses, things that they've done in the past. And that's how they go through life. So I'm asking you to start practicing self-forgiveness and make it a priority in your life. So I get up every morning, my backpack is empty. I don't even have a backpack. Because if I made a mistake yesterday, I forgive myself and then move on. Because life is too short. Lack of self-forgiveness directly impacts your levels of happiness. Okay, now maintain life work balance. I've gotten some suggestions from people, and I'm open to hearing what you guys think too. Uh, they say, there's no real life work balance. You know, maybe you should change the question and make it more life work integration, which I'm really thinking about. I may change this question. Um, Life work balance is elusive, and I know we're overworked and feeling underappreciated. And um, what life work balance looks like to me is that I spend some time with myself, practicing self care, some of the things that we're talking about here, spend some time with my loved ones that the people that are more important in my life, and then also my work. So I feel like it's broken in three different parts. Again, how well are you doing with that? Flexibility under stress. We already talked about the importance of flexibility. So that's an obvious one. Humor, laughter, and playfulness, part of our daily life. This is huge. And there's a recent study that said that if we laugh an hour a day, now listen to this, the chemicals that are released in our brain stay in our system for 24 hours. What a gift. So, but this also requires that we go easy on ourselves. Like if we make a mistake, do we have the ability to laugh at ourselves? And to be playful, to be childlike. Think about who's playful and has a great sense of humor and laugh a lot. They're little kids. Even when they fall down and they scrape their knee, they might scream bloody murder for 30 seconds. And then all of a sudden something happens, they're up and running and smiling again. And as adults, we have forgotten that. So part of that question is really get in touch with your little boy and your little girl and remember what it's like to have that lightheartedness, even in the midst of all the adversities we're facing. And last but not least, how healthy are our relationships? Why is this important? We can practice all the self-care in the world, kindness, forgiveness, gratitude, love, pampering, all the things, right? But if we surround ourselves with toxic relationships, then that robs us of our happiness and wellness. About 15 years ago, I made a conscious choice to eliminate any toxic relationship from my life. And I've had people say, well, Elia, how can you say that? I'm like, no, I made a conscious, mindful decision. I don't want any negativity and toxicity in my life. And they're like, well, how do you make that work? I'm like, well, it's simple. When I'm with people, I try to come from a place of, and I try to treat them that way with love, kindness, and respect. But I have to show up that way, and that's the qualifier, right? In return, so if I treat you that way, I expect you to treat me with love, kindness, and respect. And if you don't, we're going to have an issue. But the main thing that I need to show up that way. I can't be a jerk and then expect you to be kind, loving, and respectful back. So that's the thing and I really do not have any toxic relationships in my life. That's an honest to goodness truth. All right, Tariq, let's go to the last part. Spiritual health. Whoa, let's go back one. Yeah, there we go. Again, how strong is your belief in a positive outcome, whether it's your personal life or globally and so on? I believe that things eventually work out, and it's taking longer than I, would have hoped for, but things are getting better, and they will continue to get better. If you're not a spiritual person, and how close do you feel to God or your higher power? Again, I am a spiritual person, so I do believe in God, but I also respect someone that does not. But I also think there's somebody, even within myself, perhaps the higher self. Maybe that's the best way to describe it. If you don't believe in a higher power, your own higher self, which is that part of you that is full of wisdom and knowledge, right? Are you close or are you disconnected? Um, how much do you pray, meditate, or practice mindfulness? Again, this is where the time to get quiet and to be very mindful about the decisions we make on a daily basis, and more importantly, the thoughts that we have in our mind. So I think meditation helps a lot with that, mindfulness, and so does prayer. How often do we practice kindness or do acts of service towards others? So I'm going to pause here for a minute, because that's the seventh key to navigating a crisis. It has to do with kindness. Think about it this way: happiness and kindness are connected. How so? Happy people by nature tend to perform acts of kindness because their batteries are full, because they have practiced self-care. On the flip side, when we perform an act of service or kindness, it makes us happy on the inside. It's just a natural byproduct of that kind of service. So now I ask people, even in the middle of the pandemic, to go out there and perform acts of kindness and perform acts of service, even as difficult as life has been the last 12 months. For the most part, people have embraced that and supported that and made a commitment to do so. But I also have had pushback from people, even on live television or radio or podcast. And they're like, Dr. Elia, are you serious? You want to go out and help somebody else? I'm drowning myself. I'm depressed. I'm anxious. I'm stressed. I'm overworked. I got nothing left to give. And they've actually said, what am I, my brother's keeper? At which point I actually pushed back and I'm like, no, you're not your brother's keeper. You're your mother's keeper, and your sister's keeper, and your colleague's keeper, and the neighbor down the street, or the homeless person, or somebody who might live 10,000 miles away. Because if you're listening to the sound of my voice, I guarantee you're better off than somebody else out there. So that takes care of 90% actually of people. They're like, oh, okay, I guess, very reluctantly, but they agree. There's still a 10% that says, okay, well, even if that's the case, I'm quarantined, I'm at home, I'm isolated, I can't help anybody. To which I push back again a second time. I'm like, really? If you listen to that still small voice, your intuition or your inner wisdom, and you get quiet, how often do you get somebody's name that comes to your mind? You know what? Direct. I need to reach out to him. When I get those promptings, I don't even ask why anymore, why I need to do that. I'll text, get on a Zoom call, and ask, what is the worst thing that he can say to me? It's like, Elia, why are you calling me? It's midnight. That's the worst thing you could say to me. But more often than not, and this I put this into practice, more often than not, people will say, well, Elia, it's kind of funny that you're calling me today. I've been really struggling the last 2 or 3 days. Thank you for thinking of me, right? That's an act of service. It doesn't cost any money. It just means connect with other people, because, you know, we may not all be on the same boat, but we're all in the same storm this past year, all of us. So be kind and extend yourself. And of course, last and not least, how well do you know and live your purpose in life? I think that's a big one when it comes to happiness and, our health. I know my purpose in life has been for the longest time to make a difference in people's lives and to leave this world a better place than I found it, kind of a general sense. So being of service and being kind and so on contributes to that. So that's the spiritual health. Now add up your score if you've been following through. And Tarek, let's go to the last page of the personal health assessment. So there are really two ways to interpret your score. Obviously, one of them we already talked about. If you have fours or fives, this is great. You're doing awesome. Keep it up. If you scored a three, it's just human nature. It means you're doing something, but there's room for improvement. But you guys, the ones or the twos are, I mean, the ones or the twos are red flags. So please address them and take them seriously. And then, of course, there's the cumulative score, as you can see here. You can see where you are and what the number is, and accordingly. Um, but even if the scores are on the lower end, don't give up, because this is a great opportunity for growth. So um, this is my talk. The last statement I want to make to you is, do not procrastinate your happiness. Not when I get a raise, or when I go on vacation, or when the kids are out of the house, or when this happens. Forget all the wins. There are no guarantees in life. So practice self-care, be flexible and adaptable, extend kindness to those that are less fortunate than you are, and basically take action, right? And if you do those things, I believe that not only can we navigate through this crisis, and not just survive it, but really thrive. I'm very open to any questions that anybody might have. I don't know how many more minutes we have, or if I'm past my time, but I think we have 5 more minutes or so. So any thoughts, questions, feedback?
Dr. Elia, thank you so much. As usual, you've given us a lot to think about. Very positive comments in the chat. Outstanding. Uh, One comment was expressing appreciation from don't procrastinate for your own happiness. Um, People saying that these were great reminders and things that people needed to hear. One question, what is the best way to consistently set aside the hour a day to commit to self?
So let me know if I understand the question. So on a daily basis, practicing self-care, is that the question?
Right. I think the question is derived from it's so hard with all of the things that we have on our plate. How do you carve out? What is the best strategy to use to carve out that time for
Okay, got it. Yes, thank you, Dr. Donna. The best strategy is that you put self-care first, and then you adapt everything else around it, not the other way around. Because if you do it the other way around, you'll never have time for self-care. We know that. So when I say that part of my self-care is going for a walk, I try to do it first thing in the morning. Now, like today, I had two different conferences. That's not going to happen. But when this conference is over, so I have to practice flexibility. I didn't do it first thing in the morning because this is a unique day, but I am going to do it before the sun goes down. So that's the flexibility aspect. But typically, I try to practice self-care, you know, in the earlier part of the day. And what does that look like? It could be for a walk, going for a walk. We don't have to become triathletes. We just have to move, right? And we have to get quiet. I don't have to become a yogi. I don't have to go to India to practice mindfulness. I can do it in my own room, right? I can go to. I mean, I know you're laughing, but really, it's why are you laughing?
It's true, okay. Well, what we think we have to overachieve with everything. And so if we're meditating, we have to, levitate. And that you're raising an excellent point.
Okay, well, I'm glad you brought up overachieve, because this is a personal disclosure. My name is Dr. Elia, and I'm a recovering perfectionist. So it doesn't have to be perfect. Self-care doesn't have to be perfect. If I walk for 30 minutes today and I didn't get my full hour, I can always make it up, do an hour and a half tomorrow. It's not the end of the world, but consistency is the key. And as you know, there's a great book out called Atomic Habits.
Mhm.
When one habit that I started in April 10 months ago, do you know how much better I am now because I've been consistent for 10 months? We start something today and we continue to do it for 365 days, we're going to be in a completely different place. We're not talking about completely changing our lives here. I know we're all busy. I know we have people to take care of, friends, family, patients, clients, but you cannot neglect yourself, because otherwise, you know what happens? Burnout happens. You know what happens? You get sick. And I've experienced that myself. So I'm believe me, I've gone through my own burnout. I've gone through my own health crisis. I've gone through my own neglecting or ignoring the red flags. It happened 15 years ago and landed me in the hospital. 2 surgery, I almost died. And when I came out, I asked the surgeon, said, why did this happen to me? Because I never want to experience this again. And he says, well, that's easy. Either excessive drinking or excessive stress. And I don't drink. So I knew that I was not listening to my body. I had so many red flags, you guys, and I ignored them. So I'm asking you not to do what I did. Now, the good news is that was 15 years ago. I'm not nowhere near burnout. I will never get burnout again. I'm healthier now than I was when I was 15 years younger. Think about that. But I've had to make self-care a priority. It's not magical, and it takes work. It's not like it's like, oh, Elia, he's Dr. Happiness. He's happy all the time. No, that takes work. Happiness is a skill set, right? But you practice self-forgiveness, you practice self-compassion. You put yourself first in order to take care of everybody else. It's doable. I'm not saying it's easy, and it requires some discipline. And I haven't always been the most disciplined person, but my self-care, because with the pandemic, the stress levels have gone up for everybody. I couldn't maintain what I was doing before and still be effective and productive. So I had to say, okay, more self care now, not less, more. You got to do more, lean into it more. And that has made a difference.